Hello, me again. Okay, Year 9 English, Lockdown, Week 2, Lesson 2. Today you will need the student pack, but if you haven't received yours yet, don't worry, as all the text you need is on the PowerPoint. A pen and paper would be great, or a Word document, something to write on and write with, and somewhere to write. And a good imagination, sense of humor, and some patience. And at the end, there are some links and interesting. Well, I think they're interesting. I'm having a great time. Links to stretch and challenge activities for you to do. Okay. Also, the document that has the summary of the play can be found here. Now, there is a lot of reading. I mean, there's always a lot of reading, but if we were in school, we would be doing what's called a whoosh, which some of you may or may not remember, which is when you act out the scene and you have certain people hold up quotations and the background is kind of projected. So there'd be more wandering around. Even in your bubbles, I think we would have been able to do this, where you could work as a class. And if the teacher stayed 2 meters away, I'm sure we could have done it. So because we can't, I'm going to read it to you. I also, though, have some video clips, as I said at the end, which have a summary of the play and so forth on it. So there's lots of different ways in. It's really important, though, we think, with Shakespeare, that you know what's going on before we start. Okay, so you need to know who is who and what generally happens. Okay, so again, the document's there. If you can't follow along on the screen or you struggle with that, do print it so you have access to it. Okay. Just thought I had to include a picture of Romeo and Juliet because I know my own class probably every time I walked in the room would ask me about this. Again, no, we're not going to watch it. But it is cute, and it does have two warring factions and two star-crossed lovers, so to speak. So there are some similarities. So if you want to watch it, go for it. But it's not necessarily an academic recommendation from us, okay? But what will you learn about today? The basic plot outline of Romeo and Juliet and who the major characters are. I've thought of different things we could ask you to do, a storyboard. Your teacher may ask you to do something with the material that you're given today. It's just my job to read it through to you and make sure that you have understood it, okay? Okay, so last lesson we found out some information about the setting of Romeo and Juliet. Can you remember the city? If you guessed Verona, you're right. Okay, so there's a little staged representation there in front of you. Okay, so make a list of at least 4 things you remember about the setting of Romeo and Juliet. And if once you finish that, the extension at the bottom, make a list of reasons why Shakespeare might have chosen this setting. Okay, the play is set in Verona. Verona was an Italian city-state in the Elizabethan era when Romeo and Juliet was set. Prince Aeschylus is the ruler in Verona. He's the most important person, and everyone living in the city must follow his rules. And there are 2 powerful families in the city, the Montagues and the Capulets. Today, look at the star-crossed lovers there having a little smooch in the bottom left-hand corner. Today we will look at the plot of Romeo and Juliet. Before that, we will study the play's prologue. So you can see in bold that word prologue, pronounced pro-log, as in something you'd stick in your wood burner. Okay? But in this case, a prologue is an introduction to a book, a film, or play, and it comes from the Greek prologos, meaning pro, before, and logos, meaning word. In Romeo and Juliet, the prologue would have traditionally been spoken by a chorus. In this play, the chorus acts as a narrator. They are not part of the play, they sit outside of what happens. In the prologue, they tell the audience what will happen in the play. They help to set the scene and to prepare an audience emotionally for what is about to happen. So in our last lesson, I asked about why Shakespeare or other people may have chosen to tell the audience. In a sense, it was a bit of a warning, believe it or not, to prepare audiences for the emotional trauma of what would happen in the play. So whilst we today may value surprise and so forth and shock, In Shakespeare's time, remember, they would have been in the Globe Theatre, quite a small space compared to stadiums that we're used to today. So everybody would have been really close together, and they were really actually quite involved in the performance even. I remember learning myself that sometimes they would heckle as the play went forward. They would, shout things out. They would react. Okay, they didn't have CGI. They didn't have videos and Netflix and whatnot. They just had live actors in front of them. So despite the fact that the men were played by women, you might remember, or sorry, the women were played by men and so forth, they really believed what was happening on stage. So they had to prepare the audience emotionally so they didn't get too attached and wouldn't get too angry about the outcome when they had invested so much in it. Okay, so the chorus would prepare the reader for what was about to happen and make the emotional sting a little bit less painful. And also chorus, the idea of a chorus is, again, a Greek play convention. Okay, so somewhat like today, I'm trying to think, how Peppa Pig, for example, has the narrator who tells the story as they go along and describes what happens. The chorus would act in somewhat the same way. Okay, so here's a modern version of the prologue. So the first thing we're reading in the play, the prologue, and we're going to study the original version in the next lesson. Okay, so this is the prologue, which tells us what's going to happen in the story so that we don't get too upset by it. We know what's going to happen. Our story is set in the beautiful city of Verona, where two families of equal status renew an old argument and lead the citizens to fight and kill each other. The children of these two enemies become lovers and end their parents' disagreements by killing themselves. We will now spend the next 2 hours telling you the story of their love and how only their deaths could end their parents' anger. If you listen patiently, we will fill in the gaps that this prologue leaves. Now remember, this is the prologue I'm doing in a modern version, not me telling you that you're going to sit here for 2 hours and have the whole play read to you now, right? Okay, so the prologue says where the story is set and the basic premise of the story. Okay, so reread that to yourself now. Press pause. Reread that to yourself and write the answers to these questions. 1, where is Romeo and Juliet set? Again, repetition breeds knowledge, so you'll remember it the more often I repeat it and the more often you write it and say it. Who is arguing? What happens to the two lovers? And what resolves the argument? And here are your answers. I hope you actually did pause it and write these down instead of just going through every page. Okay, so the answer to number 1, Romeo and Juliet, is set in Verona. Brava, if you got that right, well done. Two respected families of equal status are arguing. Their arguments lead to fighting and killing. Yes, I say status instead of status. The two lovers kill themselves. Not very nice. And the deaths of the children resolves the disagreements between their two families. Okay, so that's the correct answers. Well done you if you got them right. Now that last 2 lines, you may notice we didn't go over in detail. So the last 2 lines were, if you listen patiently, we will fill in the gaps that this prologue leaves. The prologue has given us an idea of some of the events of Romeo and Juliet. And now let's find out what happens in the play. And to do this, we're going to do whoosh through Romeo and Juliet. Whoosh just implies that we're going quickly through, what would be a 2-hour play if you were to watch it from beginning to end. And again, in class, we would be kind of acting this out, moving around the room a little bit. So do settle in, because I'm going to read it with you. Again, you can listen, but it would be better if you followed along and read it off the screen. And it is also available in the document. I've actually linked in the teacher's document there at the beginning, so you can reread it if you need to, okay? There's the setting of Verona, okay? So you got some stairs, the Duomo or church there in the background, and some nice tiles Okay, so this would be projected in the classroom and we would be acting out in front of it, okay? But here is the actual story. Two members of the Capulet household are walking through Verona. When they see two members of the Montague household walk by, the Capulets begin making provocative gestures at the Montagues. One of these provocative gestures, by the way, is to bite their thumb. They square up to each other and a scuffle breaks out. More members of both households join the fray, and the city is filled with the sounds of swords swishing and striking each other. Before anyone gets hurt, the Prince of Verona enters. He's the ruler of the city, and his word is law. As soon as he enters, the fight stops. He tells everyone that any more fighting will be punished by death. If you ever disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. And then we would whoosh and move to the second scene. So you've got Capulets, you've got Montagues, kind of like modern day Crips and Bloods, right? Cows and East Cows, cows massive, right? Or something like that. So you've got two groups. This is not a new concept, nor a concept that still doesn't exist, right? In America, you've got Trump voters and non-Trump voters, it appears at the moment. So having a group of people on two different sides, this is a classic story convention that many times still happens today, both in real life and in stories, apparently. So Capulets, Montagues, a fight breaks out. The prince comes in and says, look, if you keep fighting, you're going to die. Your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. So if you forfeit, if you stop the peace, your life will be the payment. So in the second part, we get the Capulets' masked ball. Now in Italy, in Verona in the north, I have to say I visited there once, and they make the most beautiful masks. And they're kind of a thing there if you go to the north to Bologna or any area of Venice around there. These Venetian masks are really quite common. So Shakespeare likely would have known about this, and masked balls were something that were really common during this time period. So you can see this beautiful mask. They would have worn this at a party as part of the entertainment to try and hide their identity. And again, remember that we said both comedies and tragedies involve mistaken identity. And in this case, this young couple falls in love at first sight, but before they know who the other person is. Okay, so that's really important to know that they hide themselves because they're at a mask. Okay, so at the Capulets' masked ball later that evening, Lord Capulet, the respected leader of the Capulet family, begins welcoming guests to a masked ball at his home. One of the first guests to arrive is Paris. Paris takes Lord Capulet to one side and says that he wishes to marry his daughter Juliet. Lord Capulet says that Paris must try to win Juliet's love. Woo her, gentle Paris. Get her heart. But it is not just friends and family of the Capulets that's at the ball. Romeo and his mates Benvolio and cousin Mercutio are members of Benvolio is his cousin and Mercutio is his friend, are members of the Montague family, sworn enemies of the Capulets. However, the three of them sneak into the Capulet ball using masks to hide their identities. So the Capulets are having a party, and Romeo and his young mates, being the troublemakers that they are, decide to crash the party. So they really do just crash the party and go, even though they know they're not supposed to be there. So they're trying to stir up trouble, trying to go where they shouldn't be, really. So they're kind of, young teenagers, slightly older than Juliet, just going and causing trouble, really. The three of them enjoy the drinks and music at the party until Romeo spots Lord Capulet's daughter, Juliet, across the room. He falls instantly in love with her. Romeo approaches Juliet, and they talk, and they flirt, and they kiss. That happens fast. Romeo, Benvolio, Mercutio have to leave the party quickly before they're recognized as Montagues. Juliet is heartbroken when she discovers that Romeo is a Montague. So it's important to note, it's actually left out here, but it's important to note when Romeo first sees Juliet, he doesn't know that she's a Capulet. And he asks someone and someone tells him, and the same with Juliet. She doesn't know that he's a Montague, and she asks someone and then she's told. So the two of them have love at first sight without realizing that they are the child of their enemy, their sworn enemy. Such a good story. Okay, so a little recap. So pause it here. And again, where I've read it to you instead of you kind of acting it out, it's important we review it here. So what are the names of the two families? Name 3 characters from the Montague family. I just realized that I left the answer in there for you. Oops. Name the 3 characters from the Capulet family, and why did Romeo leave the masked ball? Okay, so the answers to this are Montague and Capulet. Romeo, Benvolio, and Mercutio are Montagues, and the Capulets are Lord Capulet, Paris, and Juliet. So at this stage, to avoid getting confused, one thing you might want to do is write a little chart, and at the top of one chart have Montague, and then write those boys underneath, Romeo, Benvolio, and Mercutio, and then Capulet on the other side, Capulet, Paris, and Juliet. And there's another character named Tybalt who's a Capulet that we'll meet later on, okay? And why did Romeo leave the ball? Because he was going to get discovered. So he had to leave because he wasn't invited, and it would have caused all sorts of problems if they were discovered. They do get discovered, by the way. But Lord Capulet stops anyone from interfering and lets them go in peace, okay? And now here we have the famous balcony. That's called Juliet's balcony, that balcony there. And you may already know what's about to happen. So, the boys leave because they're going to get caught. And although he has left the Capulets' masked ball, Romeo still lingers in their garden. He sees Juliet appear at a balcony above him. He can't believe how beautiful she is. And he says, "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun." He's a bit of a romantic, Romeo is. At the beginning of the play, which I've left out, he's actually writing poetry because he's in love with another girl named Rosalind. And Romeo just kind of just sees Juliet and changes his mind and thinks, oh no, I don't love Rosalind, I love this one, Juliet. Juliet doesn't know that Romeo is stood below her. Listening to what she says, Juliet is upset that Romeo is a Montague, her family's sworn enemy. And she says, "Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? Wherefore art thou, Romeo?" She's not actually asking where he is, by the way. She's actually saying, why are you Romeo? Why do you have to be Romeo? What for? Why are you Romeo? So Romeo hears this and feels a little confident. So he steps forward and the two lovers talk and fall deeper and deeper in love. Juliet says that if Romeo's love is true, he will agree to marry her the next day. Because that's what people do. You meet and then you get married the next day. She says, if that they are bent of love be honorable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow. Romeo swears that he loves Juliet, and the next day they get married in complete secrecy. Clearly there's more to be said about that, but for now, all you need to know is that Juliet, who tends to make most of the decisions in this relationship actually, says to him, look, if you really love me, so you say, then send me word tomorrow about marriage. Okay? And they do get married in complete secrecy. Only the priest, or the friar as he's known, knows that they get married. Okay, so we're back in the Verona town square here, and Romeo, this is Romeo's banishment. Romeo's Montague friends, Mercutio and Benvolio, are strolling through the hot Verona sun. They encounter Juliet's cousin, Tybalt, a Capulet. They circle each other, knowing that starting a fight will lead to their execution after the prince's warning. Romeo arrives, and Tybalt begins taunting him, saying, "Thou art a villain." Now, actually, Tybalt has actually sought them out, by the way, because they were at the party, and he knew they were at the party, but Montague wouldn't let him interfere. So he seeks them out, and he's in a really foul mood. But through this marriage to Juliet, Romeo is now Tybalt's family, and Romeo doesn't want to hurt him. Romeo knows that he cannot say anything about the wedding, and he refuses to fight Tybalt. Mercutio is outraged by this. What he thinks is Romeo is a coward. Mercutio begins a deadly sword fight with Tybalt, and Tybalt strikes Mercutio with a fatal blow. he stabs him. As he lays dying, Mercutio curses the pointless grudge between the two families, and he shouts, "A plague on both your houses." And then he dies. Dun dun dun. Even though Romeo is now Tybalt's family, he cannot let Mercutio's death go unpunished. Romeo fights with Tybalt and kills him dead, and Romeo flees. The prince enters and sees both Mercutio and Tybalt dead on the ground. For killing Tybalt, the prince banishes Romeo from Verona, never to return. And for that offence immediately we do exile him hence. So the prince turns up. And if you remember from the beginning, he did say, if you two fight anymore, you two families, then you will pay with your life. But he shows a bit of mercy, and instead of killing Romeo, he and his friends, he just says, okay, well, Romeo, you're banished. So he has to go somewhere else. Okay? Now, I know that, going off task here a little bit, but I know that this isn't going to be easy for you to take this all in one go. And really, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Just take in what you can. And there's lots of little video clips that we'll send through that will also summarize this for you. And also, as I said before, it's a good idea to have a little chart when you're studying this, especially where you're at home, where you list everyone on the Montague side on one side of your chart and all the Capulets on the other side. So you can keep track of who is who, okay? And in there we've got Tybalt on the Capulet side, who's quite like a lad's lad who picks fights and really goes over it. And then on the Montague side you have Mercutio, who again is going to be more likely to pick a fight. Benvolio, as his name suggests, good. He's more of a peacekeeper. Okay, so don't worry if you can't keep track of who is who and so forth, because this is not the it's not the last time that you will hear it. Okay, so over time it will all become really, really clear. Aha, the bedroom. Okay, sit tight, I'll explain. Juliet, so bearing in mind that Romeo's just been banished and Mercutio is dead, Tybalt is dead, and Juliet at the moment, she's sitting alone in her bedroom, okay? So this has just happened. Juliet sits alone in her bedroom. She doesn't know what's worse, the death of Tybalt, her cousin, or the banishment of Romeo, her husband. When she thinks that things can't get any worse, her mother, Lady Capulet, enters. Lady Capulet is also mourning the death of Tybalt, but she has some good news to soothe Juliet. It has been agreed that Juliet will marry Paris in 2 days' time. Paris the man, not the city. Juliet becomes even more upset. She refuses to marry Paris, and she can't tell her parents that she's already married to Romeo. Lord Capulet comes into Juliet's room to find out what all the fuss is about. At first, he's confused at Juliet's refusal to marry Paris, but soon his anger rises. Lord Capulet threatens to disown Juliet if she defies his orders. And he says, "Be you mine, I'll give you to my friend. And if you be not, hang, beg, starve, die in the streets." Mortified, Juliet runs out to seek advice of Friar Lawrence, the man who wed Romeo and Juliet in secret. Now, this scene, I have to say, we'll look at it in more detail, obviously, later in the course, but I always remember this scene because it's so horrible. Because Juliet's father, he says at one point that his fingers itch and he wants to hit her. And in many dramatic representations of this play, Capulet kind of pulls her hair, throws her to the ground. It's a very violent, very abusive scene where Capulet, the father, treats his daughter in a really, really questionable, really horrible way. So my heart always goes out to Juliet here because I think, oh, this is a horrible way to be treated by your father. Of course, Shakespeare did this to heighten the drama, right? So, and he doesn't explicitly hit her, he just talks about it. And he basically disowns her from the family. And it's a really stark reminder that marrying for love is really a privilege saved only for the poor at this time. And marrying for love is really a modern phenomenon. At this time, if you were even moderately wealthy, you married to protect your family's interests, and you married who your family said you had to marry. You didn't get to choose. So this is really bizarre. So yeah, it's a pretty brutal scene. And Juliet goes to seek out the advice of Friar Lawrence, the priest who wed Romeo and Juliet in secret. Okay, mini checkup again. Try and write the answers to these questions. Apologies, they're not laid out very well, but why do Romeo and Juliet get married in secret? Why didn't Romeo want to fight with Tybalt? Who killed Mercutio? Why was Romeo banished from Verona? What are the 3 reasons for Juliet to be so upset? And why does Lord Capulet threaten to disown Juliet? So you can pause it at this point and write the answers to these questions. I would recommend very strongly that you write it, because you'll remember it more if you write it rather than just thinking about it. Okay, so write your answers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's actually 7 questions, okay? So the answers, which I realize are not on the PowerPoint, but the answers are Romeo and Juliet get married in secret because their families are enemies. Okay. 2, why didn't Romeo want to fight with Tybalt? Well, because they're related now through marriage, and Romeo doesn't want to cause any pain to the Capulet family. But Tybalt kills Mercutio, which is the answer to that one. And then Romeo was banished from Verona because Romeo killed Tybalt. After he does it, he even screams to the sky, "I am fortune's fool." He's really upset by this. But he, as happens a lot, people get over emotional and do something they regret, and Romeo kills Tybalt. Okay? What are the 3 reasons for Juliet to be so upset? Well, she's upset because her cousin Tybalt is dead. Because Romeo killed Mercutio, and because Romeo is banished. So this young lady has dealt with quite a lot in the last 24 hours, particularly considering she's a new bride. And why does Lord Capulet threaten to disown Juliet? He threatens to disown her because she refuses to marry Paris. Now, Paris is not a Montague, and Paris is not a Capulet. He's kind of a kind of extra person on the sidelines. Wealthy, landowning young man who is well connected, who Lord Capulet thinks would be a good catch for his daughter. Okay. And here is a particularly stark looking, oh, I need to sneeze, sorry. Particularly stark looking church. Okay. Okay, so here, Friar Lawrence and Juliet are discussing a plan. Juliet wants to avoid marrying Paris and be united with Romeo. And the friar, instead of just being honest and telling her to come clean, comes up with a complicated plan, because of course he does. He gives Juliet a potion that will make her appear to be dead. Apparently such things exist. After her funeral, Romeo can enter her tomb at night and wait for the potion to wear off. And when Juliet awakes, they can escape Verona and live happily ever after. Juliet can see that the plan is filled with danger, but she knows she has no other option. I'm kind of thinking maybe she did have other options, but none of them appealed to her is actually more like it. I don't know. The idea of pretending to be dead, I suppose, could work, I suppose. And of course, as the picture suggests, this does not go to plan. And the plan unravels. The friar writes a letter to Romeo explaining the plan. A messenger tries to deliver the letter, but he's unable to get out of the city. Weirdly, there's a pandemic, a plague. This is true, there's a plague. And so the post doesn't arrive. And Romeo doesn't know about the plan for Juliet to fake her own death. Aha. I'm sure you can guess that this is going to cause all sorts of problems. Back in her room, Juliet swallows the potion Friar Lawrence gave her. Her seemingly dead body is discovered, and the Capulets mourn her death, even though she's actually still alive. So a little recap. Where is Romeo? He's banished. What is Friar Lawrence's plan? Why doesn't Romeo find out about the plan? And what is dangerous, or sorry, why is it, I should say, why is it dangerous for Romeo to not know about Juliet faking her own death? As if there's only one reason. Okay, so pause it here and write the responses to these 4 questions, and then I'll tell you the answer. Okay, Romeo is actually in another city called Padua, which you don't need to know, and you just need to know he's not in Verona. What is Friar Lawrence's plan? To give Juliet a potion so that she fakes her own death, and then Romeo would go back to the tomb with her, and they could hide in secret for a long time until everything blows over. And why is it dangerous for Romeo? Or sorry, why doesn't Romeo find out about the plan? Because the letter never reaches him because of a plague. And why is it dangerous for Romeo to not know about Juliet faking her own death? Well, there's several reasons for this. There isn't just one right answer, but clearly, if he doesn't know that she's not dead, well, he's going to be upset, isn't he? And if he's really upset, who knows what he'll do? That's basics there. If you don't need to know anything else at the moment for that. And then, of course, this all ends in catastrophe, and that there is a tomb. Okay, so it's a place where bodies at the time would have been buried, kind of half in the ground, half out of the ground, like a little stone room, I guess. And Romeo, of course, hears of the death of his Juliet. He doesn't know that she's actually still alive. Romeo sneaks back into the city at night. He enters the tomb where Juliet lays and believes that she is dead. He swears his love to Juliet and swallows a deadly poison. Here's to my love, and thus with a kiss I die, he says. Seconds later, Juliet awakes and finds Romeo's body on the floor. After everything she's been through, this is too much for her to bear. She takes Romeo's dagger and uses it on herself. And this is what she says here in green: I'll be brief. Oh, happy dagger, this is thy sheath. There rust and let me die. It's all very dramatic. The lovers' bodies are discovered. The prince enters and demands to know what has happened. Friar Lawrence comes into the tomb and explains his plan and how it ended so tragically. Lord and Lady Capulet and Lord and Montague discover their dead children's bodies in the tomb and agree to end their savage and violent feud. It has taken this bitter tragedy to bring peace to Verona. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell, really. It's left out quite a lot, but it's the basics that you need to know. Last lesson, we looked at some of the things that made a Shakespearean tragedy. It must. Before I show you, actually, what are the elements that create a tragedy? Without looking at your notes, can you remember what they are? What is it that makes something a tragedy, a play a tragedy? It has a sad ending, usually a death. There are deaths in the play. So not necessarily just at the end, all the way through, potentially. And of course, we know, can you remember the name of the two characters that die before the ending of the play? Mercutio and Tybalt. There is at least one murder plot. The play usually involves high characters like kings, queens, princes, princesses, lords, and ladies. And in a tragedy, there can be confusion around who or what characters really are, or indeed I should have added what actually happens, what's happening, right? Because in the play it's not about who Juliet is that Romeo is confused about, it's that he doesn't know she's not really dead, which inevitably leads to their death. So on your own, use the plot of the play to write a paragraph on this question: what makes Romeo and Juliet a tragedy? So at this stage, if you don't really remember, you have the summary in front of you or on the PowerPoint, so you can go back and forth and try and remember. I really think it would be a good idea at this point to create a timeline of major events in the play, which both this PowerPoint and the video that's tagged in at the end or on Show My Homework can help you with, okay? So a little plot graph, so to speak. But over and above that, what we're looking for is a paragraph about what makes Romeo and Juliet a tragedy. So pause it now and write your paragraph. Okay, so finally, we've reached the end now. So which statements are correct? There are two of them. So again, you don't need to write out these whole sentences. You can just put the two correct statements. So is it A, Romeo, Benvolio, and Mercutio are members of the Capulet family? The war between the Montagues and Capulets has been going on for generations. Romeo kills Tybalt because they were both in love with Juliet. Given that Tybalt's her cousin, that might be a bit awkward, but never mind. Juliet kills herself instead of having to marry Paris, and Romeo killed himself because he thought that Juliet was dead. Some of these sound correct, but they're not. So which ones are correct? Okay, so here are the two correct answers. Now, of course, first of all, Romeo and Benvolio are Montagues, not Capulets. The way I always remember it is Juliet Capulet rhymes at the end, doesn't it? Juliet Capulet. Whereas Romeo and Benvolio and Mercutio are Montagues. Okay, and I remember that because Mercutio and Montague. Now, Mercutio is not even really a Montague; he's just a friend. Benvolio and Romeo are cousins, but Mercutio is just a friend. So remember, when he dies, he shouts out, "A plague be on both your houses," because I think at the moment of his death, he didn't really take it seriously before then. And then when he dies, he realizes that he sort of pledged his allegiance to this household that he doesn't even really belong to, and then ends up dying for it. So he's not happy about that at the end, which of course drives Romeo absolutely crazy with guilt. Okay, so these are the two correct things. Now on the next slide, I just have a bit of more information for you, okay? So what I want you to do is to watch this clip and write your own 50-word summary of the play Romeo and Juliet. Now, that's harder than it looks to use only 50 words. And also, if you're in school and you're listening to this, I'm aware that you can't access YouTube, but we don't have any video versions that are not on YouTube of a summary. I'm trying to get them put onto ClickView, but I haven't heard back yet from IT, and I don't know when they're going to get to it. So what you may have to do then is treat that as homework. Okay, it's not very long, it's really short. So write down the address or reopen this up at home and have a look just at that little bit so that you can summarize it. Okay, watch it and summarize it. And there's another slide. And then once you finish that, for stretch and challenge, I know some of you can handle more. So what I want you to do is we're going to look at the prologue in the next lesson, and the more information you can have about that, the better. So here are two different versions. The 1996, my favorite version, and the Globe, where the actors are kind of like it's a trailer and they just read the prologue to you, which again is a summary, a less detailed summary of what happens in the play. So I'd like you to watch both of these. The links should work, I think. Yeah. Okay. And but don't do that now. Do that on your own. So once the lesson is over, make sure you have your paragraph written about what makes the play a tragedy, answers to the notes as you go. You also may want to complete a timeline, which your teacher can talk to you more about. And then finally, as a stretch and challenge, these are just very short, I think 2 or 3 minute clips that go through what we're going to look at in the next lesson. And then you don't need to do anything complicated with it. I just want you to consider which one's more effective at grabbing your attention. So which one do you watch and you think, oh, right, yeah, okay, this makes me want to watch on, and which one doesn't, or which one's more effective at grabbing your attention. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. Hopefully you know what you have to do now. And again, if anything is unclear, you can rewatch it. You can rewatch it with sound or without sound, and we will see you tomorrow or next lesson. Okay, bye-bye.